Yeah, he's been honest. He has been honest. So
Yes,
where his
yes,
loyalties
yes, yes.
lay over the years. Nothing wrong with that. We're all entitled to that.
We're entitled, and we're not.
All entitled
Listen,
to that.
guys, we're not gonna beat him down in the comment section
Not at
either.
all.
The show is for everybody, and
For everybody.
that is quite fine. And it was a pleasure talking to him. And thank you for calling and being so vulnerable, sending you. And he watches every night. He says so. Leave him. All
Well,
right.
that says a lot.
That says a lot. That says a
Yeah.
lot. He's one converted. He's a converted beard.
Oh my, oh my.
But you know what? We're laughing and we're talking here, gentlemen. But we have a serious situation in Barbados, and I actually invited Mr. Neil Marshall, who's an attorney at law, and he is going to be talking to us about contract workers in Barbados, not just in the private sector, but in the public sector as well. And Mr. Marshall, the floor is yours. You go ahead because you start off the discussion. Zico and I, we will, we'll jump in at any time. But the floor is yours, and we're a little informal because we were all dancing and so on. But it's a serious topic. All right, so over to you, sir.
Yeah, of course, Marcia. Thanks for having me. But this is not a lecture by any stretch of the imagination. This is a conversation between the host and myself, and of course, persons who will have varying views and questions and so on. But most importantly, this whole vexing issue of um, contracts of employment, more particularly and more importantly, between persons, individuals, and the state. As you know, there are two categories, at least, of worker within
Yes.
the employment. You have civil servants,
Mhm.
really, who are in service to the crown.
Mhm.
So they are really they actually have no contract. Crown
Mhm.
civil servants are not under a contract of employment. Their status is their employment is really one of status, so
Right.
that where they are offended by something done by their quote unquote employer, their recourse is not to sue on contract, on a contract of employment.
Mhm.
Theirs really falls within the various provisions that allow for that, or more particularly under the Constitution of
Oh, okay.
Barbados. Yes. Um, those contract workers that we're really looking at and are very concerned about are those persons within those quasi state entities, really statutory corporations or government finance and own private companies. So places like the NHC, NPC,
Mhm.
NCC,
Mhm.
um, BNOC. They're all over Barbados, really. Almost everything. Sports Council, Accreditation
Really?
Council, and the list just simply goes
Goes
on.
on. So let me ask you something here because that's something new, isn't it? Because normally, these were not considered statutory corporations, right? Statutory entities.
Yeah,
Were
yeah,
they?
yeah. They really came out of the. If I can just give you a historical perspective, really came out of the post-war Britain, really, where the civil service is seen as this stiff, rigid, bureaucratic
Mhm.
structures, and post-war rebuilding needed these agile, nimble entities to speed and to move and do things more along a more um, private sector type oriented
More efficient.
ethos. Yes, more efficient. They were seen as being that. And therefore, but governments were always the primary shareholders, generally sole shareholder, really,
Right.
through funds, through monies voted through parliament. for these. So each year there's a subvention, for example, made towards places like the NHC. I keep going back to NHC. Those are the more popular ones that we know of, NPC and so on. And they really are managed by a board of management appointed by the minister by instrument and writing. All right. And importantly, they're really corporate entities, the corporatization of them, and they're subject under the Interpretation Act. Really, they're private, they're their own separate personal legal entity. So they can sue in their own name, they can be sued, they can employ such staff to such offices as is necessary to further the objectives really of the corporation, you know. But overall, that who sits at the top, really a minister. So they're really to carry out the policies really of the government, the cabinet, and so on, as it relates to um, their objectives, their different policy objectives. Right.
Yeah.
So
So my question is though, what gives them the right? What gives them the power to be employing workers as contract workers? I thought they were just, everybody was, once you're working with the government, you're an employee of the government because you're using all the equipment. You're not employing yourself. So why is it now they're now calling these workers contract workers?
well, they're not no calling them contract workers. Some of the acts that give birth, establishing acts as we would call them, establishing these corporate entities really make provisions for statutory appointments, really, but to a select few offices, for example, maybe a CEO, a chief legal officer, the directors, and so on. They're all statutorily appointed. But outside of that, those entities can enter into private relations
Mhm.
with individuals and bodies for the furtherance of the objectives of their thing. So that they don't have to go through the general whole process of civil servants, really, in terms of their employment. In terms of their employment, they
Yeah.
provide us for pensions, etc., and so on,
Yeah.
different benefits and emoluments, so to speak. So that is really, so they are entitled to do that. In fact, Section 21 of the Interpretation Act speaks to that um, the points I made, that they can sue and be sued in their own name. So whereas when you bring a lawsuit, you would bring it against the Attorney General, and it is right of the Crown. So you bring it against for example, the Chief Licensing Officer and the Attorney General, or the Commissioner of Police and the Attorney General is joined. In
Mhm.
these entities, you sue directly the board, you sue the National Housing Corporation, you sue the National Petroleum Corporation, and so on. And they themselves can bring actions as well in court against persons. But really, what we want to get at is this whole advent of contracts creeping its way into some areas that have been traditionally that of the civil service.
Mhm.
So that, and in particularly these short-term contracts, which I think are the most bothersome for persons, because in a statutory corporation you can be permanently permanently employed as
Mhm.
well. But then you have these contracts that run 1 year, 2 year, etc. And they tend, what you've found now is that they are going out at the highest levels of these corporations, and they're finding themselves into various areas that were once the domain of the civil
Of the
service.
civil service,
Of the civil
yes.
service. In
Mhm.
fact, it has been floated in Barbados that we should start putting persons such as permanent secretaries
Mhm.
on contracts.
Oh my goodness,
That that
really?
that that has been floated here. One friend of mine, who is quite deeply and influentially involved with the thing, cited the case of New Zealand, where persons at that sort of level are now put on. We move to put them on these contracts, 2, 3, 4 year contracts. You see,
Yes.
and that must be, it brings no real stability really to the administration of to government administration, in my view. Respectfully, I say that.
Let me ask you something though, and Zico, feel free to jump in if you have a question
Mm.
or a comment. What I want to ask you though is, with the contract workers, what is the benefit to the government in making more of these people contract employees? I can't say employees, contract workers instead of civil service. What is the benefit to government?
Well, let me, I'll go both the pro and the con, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
They have the ability at the end of a contract, obviously, not to renew it without more. Without
Oh,
more. Your contract ends. Um, your contract ends today, the
mm-hmm.
8th of October.
Yes.
You have no obligation to renew it. It um, allows persons to, I suppose, retain the best
Mm-hmm.
and shed themselves of the worst. And you know, sometimes that is something that we must admit, if we have to be honest, sometimes plagues the thankful civil service, the inefficiencies and so on. You know, one of the most remarkable things that from my short stint in working within the environs of government, is that everybody seems to want a government job. And when they say a government job, they say it for two reasons. One, security of tenure,
Ah. Mm-hmm.
and also, on the other hand, the other underlying view is that they don't believe, by some myth, I don't know where it came from, but that security of tenure comes with gives sometimes gives a comfort, put them in a comfort
Comfort.
zone.
Yes. Okay.
You know,
Okay.
there is this view that civil servants don't work as hard or
Hmm.
don't like to
Which
work.
is it's a
It's
view. It's not
absolutely
necessarily so, but it's
false.
a view.
Is an absolutely false view
Yeah.
that has been allowed um, to gain a foothold. But I tell you, I've worked with many persons inside the civil service, and they are no different to those within the private sector.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they go over and beyond the call of duty.
Yeah.
And of course, you cannot discount in any organization, private or public,
Mm-hmm.
that you will always have one or two slackers.
Bad up. So that's the civil service. So the civil service generally give you security of tenure and comfort. And I do. You will hear people that they just need a government job, so they believe they're set. Now, what has
You get
happened is that.
gratuity, you get, just forgive me, you get things like gratuity,
Mhm.
the different benefits really that persons feel generally come with it. Is a much more taxing or onerous process
Yes.
of having to for disciplinary hearings, etc., being, and so on. So it's really one of status
Mhm.
because, as I said, you really cannot sue except you bring an action under the Constitution. You can't go and say for unfair dismissal and this and that and the third, the civil service. But again, we come right back to the statutory corporations,
Mhm.
really. So, as I said, on the one hand, you have the ability to recruit, but recruit comes at the beginning,
Mhm.
but to retain the best, most efficient workers, and so on and so forth. The nefarious aspect of that is that ministers and let me just say the government, politicians, let's call it straight what it is, can impose their will
Mhm.
on many persons who have a contract are in these short-term contracts of employment, particularly at the higher level, particularly those persons at the highest level. You see, you're going to get me shifting between those persons in the statutory corporation and those persons in the central civil service.
Mhm.
There's a reason why they're called permanent secretaries
Yes.
at that level. There's a reason they're called permanent secretaries. Their tenure is basically almost permanent. In
Mhm.
fact, you would have to go to Parliament if you wanted to remove a permanent secretary. It has to go through those various channels, and it goes all the way up to the Governor General at the end of the day.
And that's still the same way in Barbados. They have
That
not
is
changed that.
that is still the
Okay, it's
same
just
way
that, but
so
it's
far.
just those that work under them, the civil servants. They are now changing a lot of those to contract workers.
Well, what they're doing is that they are corporatizing a lot of the departments.
Mm-hmm.
So that, for example, the are creating departments. So, for example, the National Housing Corporation,
Mm-hmm.
that would have been formerly part, that really forms part of the works of the Ministry of Housing and Lands,
Yes.
you see. You have the new entity that used to be Corporate Affairs. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
now called Business Barbados. That fell under the whole, that particular ministry that dealt with the registering of businesses, etc., and so on and so forth. All right. So while those places were headed, for example, by a registrar of titles,
Mm-hmm.
who's at the apex of those things, yeah, those persons still remain, but they're now headed over by a CEO
Yes.
who
But
is now appointed directly by the minister.
wow. So that is okay. I see where
Yeah.
you say where that leads up to the minister. But let's get to, because we have a couple minutes left, and I want
Mhm.
us to focus on these contract workers and on how this is impacting families. Somebody has here. Somebody says, in my opinion, contract work is no, that's not the comment. YWalks says, in these short contracts, workers cannot even get a decent loan to pursue their goals. So talk about the contract workers and the impact on their family and the future of families and so on in Barbados.
Yes, and that we're most concerned about those persons in the majority. You have persons. We dealt with the persons at the decision-making levels where they're really subject. That 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 contract hangs over the head like a sword.
Mm-hmm.
All right, but those persons in the lower categories of employment really cannot plan a future in the way that we understand how you like to plan a future. To enter into any long-term, for example, arrangements to improve their livelihood, mortgages, Sometimes even things like car loans. The average car loan is over about 7 years at least. And where you have situations even where it is bad enough where two persons, two adults in a household, a family, um, they're both on these short-term 2 year contracts, sometimes year to year, 3 year contracts. They pay the gratuity at the end of the 2 years or 3 years. So at the end of the day, they don't even have a gratuity in which to
Mm-hmm.
look forward to at the end of their working life. Even if you kept them on a
Right.
contract in perpetuity for the next 20 years, 25 years, each year they're paid uh, their gratuity. So there's no really no obligation. So at the end of the day, whenever the services are dispensed with, they cannot even look forward to that lump sum of money. So let's say sometimes it allows them to pay off if they were lucky enough to get a mortgage, children's education, and so on and so forth. Sometimes meet health issues that crop up within that period. And so we think really that it is quite unfair and unnecessary to continue to have these short-term contracts just rolling over year to year, year to year, year to year, all right, on many persons. I've had occasion to deal with four or five persons who were in excess of 15 years, and they have always been on 2 year contracts. Now, really, do you think you can go into Royal Bank and make an application for a mortgage with that? You know, courts might loan you, might give you some hire purchase facilities because that is usually like a 2 year or so. But and that really seriously impacts upon person's ability to get on the property ladder in Barbados. It is bad enough already, but it makes it even more difficult for them to do that. And again, as I said, it does not bring stability. Does not bring stability. Persons who are on these short-term contracts, they do one or two things. Either do things who do things that to the benefit um, of the powers that be, or because they don't have security, they can be at times they're
Yes.
always searching, so that you never really get the best out of them in anything because they don't have a comfort that they can plan, they can see a future, and so on. I see one person says that yes, I would agree that contract work is suitable for professionals who move around and so on and so forth. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that when we're dealing with very high level um, persons within say the public service, that there needs to be some sort of serious, um, you know, security, some sort of security of tenure.
So a lot of people right now they feel insecure in their jobs, even in the public service, where normally that would bring some level of security. When did this? I mean, I believe there might have been before 2018. Is this something that has recently been instituted in Barbados on a large scale?
Yes, we have had these corporations for quite some time. As I said, if you look at Great Britain, it started post-war. We started coming in these things, in particular in the 80s and 90s. But what you found is that it has taken on um, a new pace, a new pace, and where there seems to be the move to corporatize many departments of government for the so-called efficiency effects that is supposed to bring. Marcia, you must not disconnect this at all from the role of the International Monetary Fund.
So,
And
so this really has come in wholesale under this government. This government has
you
brought it on even in a
you
greater
have,
measure.
because it forms, and it has. This is not the first time. It's not to say it's only a latest year, but it's taken on a different pace with this administration, and a lot of it stems from one wanting to gain control, a more efficient control of the public sector,
Hmm.
particularly at the health level, but also the dictates of the International Monetary Fund, which from day one, this government has thrown itself straight into their clutches. And part
Hmm.
of those conditionalities really has
Hmm.
been for the government to shed itself really of what it sees, what the IMF sees as this bloated, overloaded um, civil service, public sector, somewhat. Yes.
So basically, that's with this this government is like it's on steroids because I was talking to a young lady about 2 weeks ago, and she was on contract and has her child, is a single mother, and that's it. They just did not renew the contract, and I mean she was devastated.
Yes.
And hadn't been in the job very long, but the contract is short. These are some short-term contracts, and so here she is now on the breadline again, and trying to find some things that she could take care of her child and herself.
I,
And so there's that instability that it brings for real.
I mean, I know of one entity that within a period of at least a year and a half changed four accountants. Someone as important as an accountant, at the drop of a hat, they didn't change them. The people left them. So they didn't get a chance to, to rid themselves of them.
Hmm.
Those persons remove themselves of the service.
Yes.
So, businesses cannot, um, business, and I say business, I mean the public affairs and business cannot run with that sort of instability,
Hmm.
changing.
Question: with this same module, does it not put more strain on the NAS on employment in terms of unemployment benefits when you have in and out 6 months here, 8 months here, and then in and out? Does it not put more strain on the NAS with that
Well,
kind of same
that
model?
yes, I mean, if you are having a situation where persons are paying the NAS and they don't leave the job, but they are sent from the job, there are claims that are able then to be made on that service, on that service as well. A very as well as the welfare department in particular, because you're looking at a whole range of workers, from top, middle, right down to the bottom.
And if you have them in rotation, the reason why I said that, if you have them in rotation, in terms of you come and you work 9 months, obviously you will have to be paying contribution in terms of NAS and what's not.
Yeah.
And you have them in rotation. Somebody coming for 9 months, you ship them out again. They have to go back to the unemployment bureau, get some money again. So it ends up putting strain on the system itself. And then later on, we can hear that we need more people contributing. But what's the sense that you're contributing and then still have a module like this that ends up putting more money? I mean, end up pulling more from the taxpayers' dollar.
Out of that system. I
Yeah.
see Justin here. Justin here is speaking about the accountability, for example, in the awarding of contracts and work. These entities are able to enter into separate private contracts with whosoever.
Hmm.
Yes, they may set up all sorts of tendering processes and so on and so forth. Amongst over a certain threshold, must go to the minister and so on. So they don't have the sort of oversight that and rigidity in those processes that you would have within central government.
Hmm.
Sometimes, in fact, most of our biggest scandals you will see concerning financial resources tend to occur within many of these corporations. People see that is where it seems as if where the largest is, the fattest. really. And in terms of procurement practices and so on, they give an air, and I say only an air really of accountability. But the truth and fact is that if you really dig beyond the surface, you will see where, if you're not careful, you can have a friends and family affair going on in many of these
Yeah.
places. Yeah.
But you know, I mean, this is a very, very important topic. I know we were dealing with this on Wednesday, on sorry, on Monday night as well, and we're
Mhm.
going to continue next Monday. And you know, this leads me thinking about Monday night leads me to this question. Before you go, because we only have, oh my goodness,
Yes, time
4 minutes in.
flies.
Yes, yes, but it's a lot of information. 2 minutes left in this segment. Can you tell me what impact this will have on free movement of labor? Seeing that there, it's a way we employ people in Barbados right now, mainly contract workers. What's the impact you think, if any, on free movement of labor that started on October 1st? Supposed to be started on October 1st.
Yeah. And which we've pointed out the ministry has, you know, that's for another story. But we know, we have our issues with that. But of course, something like that now puts serious pressure on the scarce resources, job market resources. It really, when labor is in high demand, who sits in the driver's seat? Labor. But where then there's an abundance, a glut of labor, all
Mhm,
right, you're able to negotiate the terms and conditions, um, you know,
mhm,
below ordinarily what persons have become accustomed to, or really what can sustain them within a very high price economy such as Barbados. All right. And in fact, we have seen quite a bit of that. And this movement of persons across the region, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with it. But at the end of the day, you have to ask the hard questions. Are we really ready and in a place where we can afford to do that? We already have. I don't. I'm not moved by the government's labor statistics. I know how they are compiled. Even if you are looking for a job, you're captured as being employed, and all those sort of things. Even if you only work for 6 months, you're captured as being employed, and all these different things. Persons such as the voluntary idle. Have you been looking for a job for the last 6 months? Yes, I captured. You're employed.
mhm,
So these figures I see the government banning and around really don't reflect my reality and the reality that I see on the ground here in Barbados. In fact, you only have to drive along the south coast and the west coast, and you see
mhm,
the serious influx of foreign workers
mhm,
into Barbados. All right, and if you hear the wages which they are being paid, I mean it is really scandalous. No person living in Barbados can reasonably survive off of those things. Living a normal life, and that's why you have arrangements such as communal living
mhm. That
and
is,
so on.
yeah,
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 that's our communal living, um, poor living conditions, poor work conditions at times. These are people that are ripe for exploitation if we are not careful. If we are not careful, and I for one believe that um, anytime we have visitors or immigrants to Barbados, we must also be able to afford them the same standard and privilege which we have come to expect for people here in Barbados. So
yes.
we have to be careful with that.
Well, Mr. Marshall, thank you so much. And I know you deal with a lot of these persons on a daily basis. And
Yeah.
I was, we had a long chat about it, and I
Oh
thought it was
yes.
important for you to come on and to share with us.
Yes.
Very educational here in the history of it and where we are now. and to know that, as you said, that it is almost like it's on steroids.
Yes,
Contract
on
workers on
steroids.
steroids in Barbados. That's really what is happening. Sir, thank you so much for being with us tonight, Mr.
Well,
Nemo.
the pleasure is mine, Marcia, and I will do the unusual thing. I will invite myself back on when you're ready to discuss this free movement, this movement of people and this immigration bill and so on and so forth, because it is rife. That is really rife with a lot of challenges
Yes,
in
I
Barbados. Yes,
definitely will want him to. We always need lawyers to come back on, so we
yes.
appreciate it, and
Yeah.
I will
Not
be
only
calling
is it
you.
unlawful, but it has serious implications for day to day life and so on.
Yes,
Barbados, huh? So
yes,
that's it. All right.
yes,
Well, I
yes,
thank you very much for having me.
yes, sir.
And I
Thank
will
you.
stay on and I will continue to watch the show from afar and contribute.
Thank you, and see you on Saturday. I'm gonna look for you.
You
The
look
same
for me.
coming,
You
and
look
I'm
for
gonna
me.
look for you. Bring some people from St. Philip with you.
And you can provide the video evidence to your guests.
Yes, but don't come alone.
No,
Don't come alone.
no, I
Bring
wouldn't.
the people that you work with in St. Philip, North.
Down the road.
Yes,
Down the road.
bring
It's
the
very
people with
important.
you.